point out the colonial American resistance movement. If you don't have a plan for slavery in the British Empire, if you don't have a plan to raise the state beyond accountability to the population over which it rules, why are you accepting what's going on in Bengal? Why are you accepting what's going on in India? That is a pure despotism if there ever has been one, right? There, many colonial American resistance leaders point out, taxation without representation is an accomplished fact. The Bengali peasant population is tax, tax, tax without a single representative. There's not a newspaper, there's not a petition, there's not a court they can go to, there's not an assembly where they can seek redress, there's no checks on the imperial bureaucracy or the army whatsoever. And basically, this is the situation in 1770 when Lord North decides to remove the Townshend duties to quiet the crisis. And so to take things to a conclusion, basically, that's how things lie for about 3 years. But then we're back at where we began, right? We're back at where we began, the problem of the Tea Act. Lord North faces this difficulty, which is the British East India Company is on the verge of bankruptcy. Why? Because their extractive and monopolistic policies have been ruinous in Bengal. They've led to famine. They've led to undermining the goose that lays the golden egg. I mean, I can't get into the details, but the British East India Company is using its political power in the late 1760s to impose a monopsony on Bengal, meaning merchants and manufacturers in Bengal who want to sell goods have to preferentially sell them to the British East India Company, which means that the prices aren't being determined by the market, they're being determined by the East India Company. And that's economically ruinous. It's destroying the well springs of Indian life and the economy. And it's in turn going to make it harder for them to pay revenues to the British East India Company, to taxes. And so the whole British East India Company is spiraling out of control by the late 60s, early 70s, and it's on the verge of bankruptcy. And if it goes bankrupt, the biggest multinational corporation, one of the biggest holders of government debt, one of the biggest players on the London stock market will crash. This is too big to fail on steroids. And so Lord North steps in with this act, the Tea Act, right? And that Tea Act, although it seems banal and simple enough when the Prime Minister and his cabinet passes it through the British House of Commons and the House of Lords, and King George signs it on May the 10th, 1773, making it effective, it signals two things to the colonists. One, there is going to be full support for the British East India Company and everything it's doing in Bengal, which means that an important part of the British Empire has been lost to liberty. That's their understanding. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. That's their understanding, that there is a plan for slavery that has been realized in Bengal, right? Now, British say it's our conditions, it's imposed on us, we can't rule in any other way, but that's the view of many leaders of the colonial American resistance movement, that a plan for slavery has been realized in Bengal, and British ministers are willing to do anything to uphold the British East India Company. Look at, they passed the Tea Act. Therefore, they're committed to this empire, not of consent, not of liberty, but of coercion and domination. Two, the other thing it signals to the colonial American population is, they are really doubling down on this Townshend duty on tea. That isn't just like a little fig leaf. They are going to make the East India Company pay it. They're going to make tea salespeople pay it. And therefore, they're going to establish the principle of Parliament can tax the colonists without having a single representative in the colonists in Parliament in London. Parliament is going to tax the colonists through this duty on tea, right? Because the Tea Act is a doubling down on the duty on tea. Parliament is going to tax the colonists without consulting their colonial assemblies. So this is what the colonial American resistance movement essentially has in its minds, right? They're backing a despotic empire in Bengal, and they're allowing the East India Company to establish a presence in North America. And in establishing that presence, they're doubling down on the tea duty, which is a doubling down on the idea of an absolute parliamentary authority to tax the colonies without representing them in any way, shape, or form. That is, the future is going to be basically taxation without representation, a state that is not accountable to the people over whom it governs. And that is going to lead, right, to the event that Andrew tells me you'll be coming here to hear another lecture about, hopefully didn't go over time as badly as I did, on the Boston Tea Party in December 16th, 1773. right, which triggers the renewal of the imperial crisis and ultimately leads to essentially the total breakdown of imperial authority and the end, more or less, of the British Empire in North America. I would like to leave you, if your patience would bear, with one quote. It's from a radical member of the British House of Commons named George Dempster. He had been a follower of William Pitt, the Earl of Chatham, and he's trying to point out to his fellow members of the House of Commons in 1775 how they got themselves in this situation. George Dempster is a political radical. He wants the reform of Parliament. He's a friend of America. He's against the American War, and he's trying to tell his fellow members of the British House of Commons how they got to this situation. He writes, or sorry, he says on the floor of the Commons, this is on October 27, 1775, "In my conscience, I think the claim of the Americans is just and well-founded, to be left in the free exercise of the right of taxing themselves in her several provincial assemblies, in the same manner that Ireland now does and always has done. By this beautiful part of our Constitution, our wise ancestors have bound together the different and distant parts of this mighty empire. By this single principle heretofore inviolate, they have diffused in a most unexampled manner the blessings of liberty and good government through our remotest provinces. Look, sir, into the history of the provinces of other states, of the Roman Empire in ancient times, of the French, Spanish, Dutch, and Turkish provinces of more modern date, and you will find every page of it stained with acts of oppressive violence, of cruelty, injustice, and peculation. But in the British provinces, the annual meetings of their little assemblies have constantly restrained the despotism and corrected the follies of their governance. They watch over the administration of justice and from time to time enact such salutary regulations as tend to promote their happiness and well-being. And what, sir, I beseech you, could ensure the regular meetings of those assemblies, ever troublesome to governors, but they're retaining in their own hands, like us at home, the power of granting the funds necessary for defraying the current expense of government. Were your provincial assemblies deprived of this power, I cannot see wherein the government of America would differ in any way from that of India. And has our inquiries in a former session into the administration of Bengal made us in love with the Eastern species of government we have created? Do we seriously wish to transplant that rapine despotism and cruelty in India to America? Thank you, and thank you. Sorry for trespassing on your time.